Hey everybody, welcome to the Sustainability in Motion podcast, brought to you by ED4S. We focus on the fast-moving sustainability world to help the business community better understand the sustainability and environmental challenges we face. I'm Matt Orsagh, Chief Content Officer at ED4S.
Hey everyone, I'm Maisuradze, founder and CEO at ED4S, and it's great to be back here with you, Matt, today.
Today we're going to be talking to Tiffany Grabski, head of the SSE Academy, and Anthony Miller, coordinator of the Sustainability Stock Exchange Initiative. We'll talk about the work of the SSE and the SSE Academy. Welcome to the podcast, Tiffany and Anthony.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
All right. First of all, kind of broad table setting things. What is the SSE and the SSE Academy, and how do they promote sustainable development?
Thanks, Matt. The Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative, we were launched back in 2009 by the UN Secretary General. And you can think of us as sort of a smaller sibling to other UN partnership initiatives like the UN Global Compact, which works with companies. You've got the UN Supported Principles for Responsible Investment, which works with asset owners and asset managers. And you've got the UNEP Finance Initiative, which works with banks and insurance companies. Stock exchanges are unique animals, and they didn't quite fit into any of those boxes. And so the SSE was born to deal with that. And the SSE is a partnership program between UNCTAD, Global Compact, PRI, and UNEP. So we are well connected with all those other partnership programs. And why does the UN work with stock exchanges? It's because stock exchanges are a unique lever in the marketplace. They are at the intersection between issuers and investors and security market regulators and standard setters. So they offer a really unique opportunity to influence market practices, to promote sustainable finance, and particularly the financing of the SDGs. You asked about the SSE Academy. One of the SSE Academy is the market education arm of the SSE. And one of the traditional functions of stock exchanges, long before anybody ever heard the term sustainable finance, stock exchanges have always had the function of providing market education. Why? Because being a listed company is complicated. There are a lot of rules you have to abide by. And so it requires constant education on how you meet compliance with whether it's tax code or other listing requirements or corporate governance disclosure, financial accounting rules, and so on. So stock exchanges are more than happy to insert new sustainability priorities into their existing market education programs. The challenge for them is, of course, having the expertise. We have over 130 exchanges as members of the SSE. So we're covering well over 100 markets around the world. And you can't expect each one of these exchanges to have an in-house expert on every sustainability issue. So that's where the SSE Academy tries to bring that expertise to the table and offers that market education programs for exchanges in a way that gives them a universal, standardized approach around the world, so you don't have a lot of exchanges going off in different directions, and also helps many exchanges. Many exchanges can't necessarily afford this when we're working with exchanges in emerging markets. So the SSE tries to remove these kind of barriers to entry, not only for the exchange, but their market participants.
Well, just before we go, a question popped up in my head. I'm curious, because I remember when the SSE started, you said 2009, and now you have over 100, stock exchanges as part of that. In the first iteration, how many stock exchanges were partners, were part of this, and what was the growth?
Yeah, we started with 5 founding signatories. And so, and then it just grew from there. And it's sort of, a bit of word of mouth. I think the credit really goes to the exchanges. Many exchanges are genuinely very interested in promoting sustainable finance. And as I mentioned before, exchanges are at this kind of intersection of market participants. That also puts them at the intersection of a lot of different pressure points in society, in the marketplace, and so on. So any of the broader societal trends that are fueling responsible investment practices that you see with asset owners and asset managers, or responsible business practices that you see with some of the companies, listed companies who are members of the Global Compact, these also are going to present themselves to exchanges, which often can get caught in the middle of that and need to answer questions. Exchanges are also played a role in new product offerings, helping to introduce new sustainable finance products and new financing opportunities. So it was really driven by our members. Exchanges, let's say they just sort of came out of the woodwork around the world. Once the SSE was launched, it grew gradually at first, and then it started to snowball. And today, most of the exchanges in the world are members.
Thanks. That really helps us understand, how we got to where we are.
Yeah, and I discovered the Sustainable Stock Exchanges initiative last year, and I was actually really surprised as this piece of the puzzle was not there as I was looking at the sustainable finance landscape, at least in my head. And I was wondering, how can stock exchanges actually promote sustainability? We all know about the short-termism, the speculation, etc., just a short-term nature of the market. But then I became aware of two important things. One is obviously the role of stock exchanges in terms of capacity building for those markets. And the second is actually, as you get listed on the stock exchange, is literally a license to operate, or rather license to access a huge amount of capital. And so it was really fascinating for me to discover that actually stock exchange has the right to select who do they give access to. So on that point, I did a bit of research this morning. There's about 38 exchanges that are part of your members that have a specific listing criteria that align with ESG disclosure. So question to you, Anthony, could you share with us a little bit more? What are the topics they need to disclose? What kind of trends are you seeing? Because I see the stock exchanges from Zimbabwe, France, Japan, India, they all have this requirement built into the listing criteria. So I'd love to see if there's any common trend around them or any particular things you'd like to share about that.
Maria, it's a great question. This is one of the, we track a number of things in our database online. We've got the most comprehensive database in the world on stock exchange sustainability features. And that's one of the things that we're tracking. So in 38 markets today around the world, you have mandatory ESG disclosure. If you go back 10 years ago, that number would have been very close to zero. There is a huge trend and momentum in the space. And let's remember that SDG 12, I think it's target 12.6 for your viewers who are into these things, is promoting universal sustainability reporting that's integrated into mainstream corporate reporting by the year 2030. I think we're well on our way there. I think by the end of this decade, we will see in most markets mandatory sustainability reporting. You're asking about some of the topics that they're getting at. That has been an evolving space. We've seen so it depends on when the rules came out. Some of the earlier rules were more general and would say things like you produce a sustainability report and may not have specific guidelines on that. As the space has evolved, it's gotten more and more specific. So let's look at some of the more recent rules coming out of the EU. Which are now not only requiring sustainability reporting, but they now launched their own standard, the European Sustainability Reporting Standard, or ESRS. So that becomes a requirement, and that's quite comprehensive. That's covering both environmental issues and social issues. In some markets, the focus is much more on climate disclosure, and the climate crisis has certainly sharpened regulators' attention. People are concerned about systemic risks of climate to financial systems. So in some markets, that disclosure can be focused primarily on climate. And then in other markets, it can be widespread. And we've seen markets adopt specific standards like GRI. GRI is required in some marketplaces. In other places, they've introduced some sort of national guidelines. It's just over a year now since the IFRS Foundation has launched their standards, IFRS S1 and S2. And there are a number of markets that have indicated that they will adopt those in the near future. So it's an interesting period now. And so, yes, the trend, if you're asking about specific topics, the trend is toward specific standards and really the adoption of international standards. And right now, there's really only 3 standards in the world. You've got GRI, you've got the IFRS S1, S2, and you've got ESRS, which was designed for the European market, but the way the rules are developed, there can be a lot of non-European companies that get sort of pulled into that sphere. And there may be other markets in the world, regulators who just decide they want to adopt ESRS. That's up to them. I mean, but we have seen in the past non-European markets adopting European rules. So we'll have to see how that plays out. All of those things are still relatively new.
That's really encouraging to see. So this consolidation that we're seeing, so it's not some separate set of items that are being selected by different exchanges, but rather alignment with different frameworks. They're starting to be global standards on reporting. That's great to see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is what brings into focus the role of the SSE Academy and Tiffany's work, is that as you start to roll out, as regulation starts to lead into standardization and the adoption of international standards, then you suddenly create an enormous appetite, because it's one thing to require something. It's another thing to actually implement it. And requiring something is the stroke of a pen for a regulator. Having hundreds and thousands of market participants implement it, that is a lot of education. It just doesn't happen overnight. And market regulators realize that. And in many cases, when you look at non-compliance with these kinds of rules in the marketplace, it's not because companies have some sort of nefarious, evil agenda to shirk the rules. That's not it at all. It's they're confused. So really, all regulation implies education. Without education, you're just never going to have any kind of compliance with that.
Well, yeah, that gets right to the next question we had is, how does, and you touched on this a little bit, Anthony, how do new standards like IFRS and other standards, mostly coming out of Europe, but more and more is coming, and it is expected to come in the coming years. How does that affect your work at the Academy, and how does that affect markets?
Thanks, Matt. I'll pick up on that one. We work a lot with the IFRS standard because we do training on that. And Marie and I were recently talking because she joined one of our training, and we were connecting over the need for education in that. But I think, the most obvious thing we're getting out of these new standards, we want to say, is consolidation, because they're not new. What we're seeing is we're getting other frameworks and standards that have been in the market a long time being pulled together and given a new name. So I wouldn't say that we have a ton of new standards coming out. We have new science coming out. We have new methods coming out, but they're being pulled into a consolidation of standards. So I think that's, something we might talk about a lot, but we shouldn't underemphasize how important that is, because by consolidating these standards, we are making it easier for companies. We've heard time and time again from companies through stock exchanges that will share the problems the companies are having is they don't know where to start, because it seems like there's an alphabet soup out there. They don't know which standard to follow. And if you don't know which standard you're starting with, it is really actually quite hard to start, right? You don't know where's your first step. Not only did we get a consolidation of standards, but we got it kind of in various levels. So we got the CDSB, TCFD, CDP questionnaire all coming together from that climate aspect. So when companies are focusing specifically on climate, if they used any one of those, or if they want to use any one of those, at least we now know how they all fit together, and you can move forward kind of collectively on that same journey. And then the same with the sustainability reporting more broadly, if we want to go even beyond climate. SASB and integrated reporting both came into the IFRS Foundation too. So we're getting, an understanding of those companies that have already been using this and how to pull that together. But also, I think what's really important there is we're pulling together an alignment between all of these aspects. So it's not just our, group of climate and biodiversity and other sustainability and human rights. We're starting to pull that all together. And if you were thinking of those in silos, if you were thinking that, the social aspect didn't impact the environmental aspect, then you were actually missing the whole plot. You weren't doing your sustainability reporting correctly. So I think that alignment of pulling it all together is what's helpful. And Anthony had mentioned that there's kind of three that have come to the top through this consolidation process of the ESRS, the GRI, and the IFRS is S1 and S2. What's really key there is they've all been mapped, they've been aligned, they're working together Whereas previously we had, a few different frameworks and standards that were out there, but they weren't coordinating. They weren't, saying, let's put out documents together. Let's help people understand if they start with one, how they get to the other. And we have that now, and we're continuing to get more and more of that. So I think that's really key. But maybe before we move on, I think we talk a lot about consolidation. But for me, the big thing we have here now is the connection within an organization. So keep in mind that this consolidation came from the IFRS Foundation, which is an accounting standard. But when we talk about sustainability, we cannot put that in our accounting team. It doesn't belong just there. When we talk about sustainability, it's the whole organization, right? It's going to touch everybody. So now we've kind of taken these, put them all under one roof, and we're forcing teams to talk to each other, and the negotiation within the organization and the sharing of the data. And that's where the value comes from. So companies are going to start seeing a lot more value, I think, from their sustainability reporting now that we're pulling this all under one roof.
Yeah, that's a theme that's come up many times on the podcast. This is only our 12th episode, but it comes up again and again about how it's not a compliance exercise. It's not a sustainability team exercise. It's really got to be the whole company. The culture of the company has to take sustainability into account, or it doesn't really get done well. Companies that do it well do better.
Or you don't get value out of it.
Yeah. And this is something we talk a lot about at ED4S through embedding sustainability. We're writing a white paper actually right now as we speak on different roles across different departments that are being affected by all this movement. But I want to circle back, Tiffany, to the topic of, from a point of view of the company that want to be listed. So just listing on a stock exchange certainly comes with a lot of paperwork, a lot of investment, and a lot of efforts. But we're also seeing a trend that many companies actually decide to stay private just because of the burden that comes with the stock exchanges. And this is where I was a little bit worried that adding that extra layer of complexity, having to now report on this extra financial or ESG topics might just encourage companies to stay private a little bit longer. But coming back to the topic of the reporting regulation, the ESRS, the IFRS, etc., it feels like it's a good thing for the sustainable stock exchanges, which in the past may be kind of slowing themselves down just by adding this additional requirement. But now that the ESRS will be applicable for both private and public companies, that kind of makes it an even ground. So whether or not you need to disclose on ESG is no longer an argument. Like, do you feel it the same way?
Well, I think we have to remember what we mean by a private company and what they're actually doing, because by not listing doesn't mean that you don't do services or interact or are not in the value chain of a listed company. So if we look at a lot of the sustainability information and the risks and opportunities that companies are now evaluating, you can't do that without evaluating your value chain, right? The majority of your risks and opportunities are linked to your value chain. So whether you're listed or not, this is anyway something you have to be engaging with, or you don't have a market to trade with outside of capital markets, right? Who's going to be buying your products? Who's going to be working with you? So I don't think it's as far as, I've seen really putting anyone, at pause for listing. I think already listing is a huge endeavor. Even before sustainability reporting existed. I mean, Anthony's talked with a few people, and he has a good quote, and maybe he could remind us of it afterwards, about a board member who said how many lawyers is needed to list. But it's not an easy endeavor listing. It's something that requires companies with, that are very large, that have a lot of staff and a lot of lawyers. But once you are listed, you actually get certain protections in that. What you are disclosing often is something that's required of you, especially in today's world of greenwashing. People are hesitant to share information if they're not required to share that information, unless they're really certain about what they're saying in that information. And sustainability information is very forward-looking, so we can never be fully certain about it. It's more us projecting and sharing our strategy in order to tackle these risks and opportunities.
Got it. Good. So that brings me close to the capacity building question, which is a question close to our heart at ED4S. That's all we do. And this is how we connected with you, Tiffany. So I know that you do a lot of capacity building. It was amazing to find out that SSE does it for free, and it's for member stock exchanges and their stakeholders. Could you tell me a little bit How does it look like? What topics do you cover? Who's participating in capacity building? Just give us a little bit more details on how companies can benefit of that.
Sure, Maria, happy to. The SSE Academy, I think Anthony mentioned, was launched in 2021, and it actually came from demand from our stock exchange members. So we had been tracking for some time, as Anthony mentioned, a few activities that stock exchanges do pertaining to sustainability, and one of those was training and education. And we were seeing a sharp increase, actually, of stock exchanges that wanted to do training and education on sustainability. And they were coming to us to say, help, we don't have, the expertise. We don't, have the access to the top experts on this, but our companies really need our support. So what do we do? And so we decided to take on that challenge and see how this might work about, us kind of centralizing the expertise and making it available to all of our members. And we started in 2021 with TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And the objective was to kind of provide that expertise to the stock exchanges that needed it so that they could train their markets. Now, instead of training every single stock exchange employee, what we did is we just had them host the event and we brought all the experts to the event. And it far surpassed, I think, any of our expectations, mostly about the reach we could have. Because as Anthony mentioned, there's over 130 members and they all have, a Rolodex of loads of contacts, not only listed companies, but also other market participants in their market. And all of these organizations have multiple people in their companies that need this expertise and that want to learn. And as Anthony mentioned, by dropping that entry of barriers, making sure that this was free for anyone to access, easy, online, very accessible, we found that it was actually a great tool to disseminate knowledge, essentially. So we've now trained more than 30,000 market participants around the world since we launched that first training. We've had over 160 workshops of nearly 400 hours of training, and we've reached more than 145 different countries by holding training this way. And we've evolved the topics since, and we're constantly trying to keep up now with the different topics that stock exchanges are seeing demand for. So TCFD obviously then turned into ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, or the IFRS S1 and S2. And then we also have provided some training on GRI. And we do quite a big training program on gender equality in global capital markets as well. And we're working now on a number of other training programs, including biodiversity with TNFD, transition plans to go along with climate disclosure, and human rights and other areas.
That's fantastic. Tiffany, can you share a little bit in terms of the North American participation? Like, how's the appetite? Because we do have a lot of our listeners from US and Canada. So how do you feel about this market and the appetite for training?
Well, I'm Canadian, so of course I love to see appetite in North America. Actually, North America is an interesting case because all our stock exchanges we work with in North America are very active in this space. They actually often have dedicated teams that work on sustainability, and they hold their own training. So I would say that North American exchanges in many instances have been leading in terms of training and education, and for some time now. However, we do feel that in addition to local training and education, which those exchanges, as well as some others around the world, are very good at providing that local education. As we were talking about early, this global perspective of a global standardized access directly to the top experts style of education is a really good complement to that. So we still offer it in markets where stock exchanges might already be providing kind of their own bespoke training. And we have held a number in North America, and often those are really well-attended sessions because there's so much interest and a lot of regulation coming forward too.
Well, that's promising. Good to know.
That's great. Before we let you go, you told us a lot about what the SSE and the SSE Academy offers, but we just want to make sure we have everything covered. What are some of the other tools the SSE provides members so they know about them and our listeners can know about them?
Sure, Matt. The SSE, we have three pillars of activity. One of them is consensus building. One of them is research and normative guidance. And then the other one is technical assistance, market education, which we've talked about a lot on this call today. So the first two areas, consensus building, we do have high-level meetings with leadership, CEO roundtables, that sort of thing, which is very important to get buy-in from the top. And it's also important to have this multi-stakeholder conversation. Typical SSE meetings will have not only CEOs of exchanges, but we'll have security market regulators, standard setters, investors and issuers as well. We have historically seen that there can be a tendency to pass the buck and blame all the world's problems on whoever's not sitting at the table at the moment. So it's useful to have all of these stakeholders in the room. It's also a recognition too that, stock exchanges, they do not, in many cases, they do not hold a magic wand. Many people look at exchanges as if they're these kind of omnipotent actors. They're not. They are sitting in the middle of all of these market participants, and they're kind of jugglers trying to make all these things work smoothly together. And so it's important for them to be able to communicate the challenges they have to their regulators, and to be able to communicate with their issuers, investors, and standard setters, and so on. So we try to facilitate that conversation. We also do a lot of work in the area of normative guidance. And this is something that exchanges have appreciated over the years. You'll find this on the publication page of our website, guidance on all kinds of topics from green finance and gender equality, climate disclosure, derivatives markets, and so on. These guidance documents we develop with exchanges, and we're often, the heart of them is really about best practice sharing from exchanges around the world, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Many exchanges, not all, but many exchanges in the world are not directly competing with one another. And they don't see sustainability issues as necessarily a competitive issue. They're very happy to share lessons learned with other exchanges around the world. So that's a very useful tool that many exchanges appreciate. The other form of guidance we use that's also quite closely related to our education programs are model guidance, where we will develop guidance that's written in the voice of an exchange to their market participants. And this is really to help exchanges overcome what we refer to as a blank page syndrome. Exchanges might want to provide guidance to their issuers on topic X, but they really don't know where to start. So we'll provide them a model guidance, which is a template. They can literally copy and paste it, put their logo on it, and push it out the door. But they're also free to modify it and adjust it. In fact, we encourage them to do that, to modify it and adapt it to their local market circumstances. So that's been helpful. Maria, you cited earlier this number, but there's 38 markets in the world that have mandatory ESG disclosure. There's another number that's interesting to track over the long term. If you go back to about 2012 or 2014, so just over 10 years ago, the number of exchanges in the world with written guidance, just voluntary written guidance to their market participants on ESG disclosure, was maybe around 10. Most exchanges did not have this. We produce model guidance on ESG disclosure. We followed up with a number of other supplemental model guidances in this area. Today, that number is north of 70. So more than half of our members are producing guidance. And if you follow the trend line over time, what you will see is that these kind of written guidance documents coming from exchanges are typically a leading indicator of mandatory rules that come later. A classic example that I always think is a very good example is what happened in Hong Kong many years ago. Hong Kong introduced written guidance on voluntary sustainability reporting, but they told their market, this will not be voluntary forever. We're going to change it to mandatory in about 5 years. And 5 years later, sure enough, they flipped the switch and said, now it's mandatory. That is an excellent practice. And we've seen that duplicated in a number of markets around the world. So this is something that we help exchanges with as well, with these guidance documents. A lot of our rest of our research is around benchmarking progress. I mean, how do you know if you've arrived if you're not really keeping track of where you are and where you're going? So we have a number of data points that we track in our online databases. We've got 6 different databases online. We produce a series of publications we refer to as market monitors, which are really very short data-centric documents, which are just tracking measurable progress across a number of fields. So these are the kind of ways that we work with exchanges. The only thing I would just add before I close is to say that we do have a lot of bespoke advisory services behind the scenes. I mean, every week we're getting contacted by our members who are asking us detailed questions about specific things. And many of those kind of conversations, those bilateral conversations we have with exchanges are what drive new work programs. It's, when we start to get these questions, and sometimes we get questions and we don't know the answer to it, and we say, wow, that's a good question. Let's launch a new research program. Let's come up with some answers to that. So that's really where the topics that we work on come from. It's all very much demand driven.
Wow, that's amazing. You're really bringing down the barrier of entry, because you're not only enabling the initiation, like getting started, but then as you go more mature in your sustainability journey, you're there to provide this advisory expertise. That's fantastic work that you're doing.
That's great. A lot of great information for our listeners. Hopefully some of whom are stock exchanges who can get something out of what you guys do. Unfortunately, Tiffany promised us a lawyer joke earlier in the podcast. So I'm going to have to call you out on that. So what is this lawyer joke?
There was no lawyer joke. And this was a quote from...
Oh, quote.
It was just a quote from an exchange official. You're talking about the difficulties of listing. We often get questions about ESG. First of all, I never want to make light of the fact of burdens on issuers. And regulators and everyone should take those very seriously and consider ways to reduce the burdens on listed companies. And it's critically important to ensure that the gulf between listed and non-listed companies does not get too wide. I think the anecdote that Tiffany was referring to was a conversation I'd had with the CEO of an exchange a while ago, who once told me that, when people come to list on his exchange, he almost tries to talk them out of it. And he says, well, if you haven't got one room with 100 lawyers and another room with 100 accountants, then go away and come back tomorrow. It's complicated to be a listed company. For people to say, oh, this ESG burden is too much, it's like, well, it's marginal. You have no idea what you're talking about. Being a listed company is complicated. On the other hand, how many multi-trillion-dollar companies do you have listed on the exchange? I mean, there's a reason why people list. I mean, do you remember like a few years ago when we first crossed that threshold of having a $1 trillion company and everybody was shocked? Wow, there's a $1 trillion company. Today, that $1 trillion company is worth $2 or $3 trillion, just one company. And there are multiple $1 trillion companies in the largest market in the world. So, there's a reason why people list. It's really an excellent way to raise capital and finance good business ideas. And what's a good business idea? A good business idea is an idea that solves people's problems. And the biggest challenges that humanity faces in the 21st century are typically related to social environmental issues. So show me a company that can solve some of the most challenging issues that we face in this century, and I will show you the next $1 trillion company.
Yeah, well put. That's a great way to end things. Well, thanks, Tiffany and Anthony, for joining us, and thanks to our listeners for sticking with us. If you want to connect with any of us, we're all very easy to find. We can't hide from you on LinkedIn and social media. Feel free to reach out. If you want to learn more about ED4S, you can find us at ed4s.org. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.